Here I am, Romeo Dobbs with Happy Hour.
Great health from Connor. Great health.
Great health.
I'm here every
great
day.
Health,
Yeah.
Great hair. You're here every day.
15 minutes early,
Quality
some would say.
wardrobe.
Yes.
Yeah, you're punctual.
Yes.
Yeah.
Really good.
High floor.
High floor.
Yes.
Really
I
good
know
at
the
avoiding.
ceiling is
Avoids hits like Tyler Lockett.
Yeah.
That's right.
Avoids hits. Yeah, gym
Good
rat.
scouting report.
Gym rat.
There
You're
we go.
constantly working out. Yeah,
Maybe
exactly.
sneaky athletic, we don't know.
Yeah,
Very
exactly.
sneaky.
High character as
Yeah,
well.
high
Thank
character.
you. Wow.
Good locker room guy.
Yeah.
He's
Wow.
a good locker room guy. That's what
I'm
he
already
is.
on the Patriots.
Yeah.
Look at that. It's amazing how that works out.
Fantasy Football Happy Hour with Matthew Berry, served by Applebee's.
Happy Friday. Welcome to the Fantasy Football Happy Hour. My confidence has never been higher. I'm Connor Rogers alongside Jay Croucher. And you see him over there, Matthew Berry. Matthew, where are you?
I'm at my house. I'm in the one room that I can find that is quiet here during the summer. With Labor Day weekend upon us, all of my kids are home. All except my son Connor, who's at Alabama. But 4 of my 5 kids are in the house. They've got girlfriends and friends over. So I'm in my daughter's old room is where I am. It's the one place that I can find that will be quiet and has good internet for us. So yeah, that is a stuffed unicorn you see behind me. Absolutely. My daughters have since moved into their older brother's room. They split up my twin daughters, but at one point they slept in the same room, and you're looking at it.
Yeah, well, 2 things. One, just to clarify, he is not your son, though that often we does get mistaken for. It's a different Connor. Secondly, can you talk to us about you're kind of obscuring the stuffed teddy bear that it looks like you're holding hostage in the chair behind you. Is there a story behind that one? There's another one.
I mean, that's mine. That one's mine, and you can't let it escape. Can't let it escape. You know what I mean? 100%. That teddy bear. By the way, I've broken that teddy bear down. That teddy bear will answer any question you want and do any response you want. I've broken it down. Kind of like what they did to Reek in Game of Thrones. That's what I've done to this teddy bear.
Unbelievable.
All right, now that we've sifted through the chaos of the Berry home, we have a busy Friday. We are going to go through some of the 10 lists of 10, of course, from Matthew. We got preseason risers, but before we get into that, of course, our player news as well. Get the Rotoworld Fantasy Football Draft Guide. Go to NBCSports.com/draft guide and use promo code Berry20 for 20% off at checkout, J10 or Connor5. Listen, we have some notable Rotoworld player news to kick off the show with. Something that we've been keeping an eye on throughout the summer seemed to have a setback, and that is Cooper Kupp's injury. Rams head coach Sean McVay said that he had a setback. He's day-to-day. It's being classified, Jay, as a muscle strain. But for a player that we consistently talk about as a first-round wide receiver because of the offense he's in, because of the talent he has, this is not what you want to hear as we creep closer to week 1.
No, absolutely not. And that's why Cooper Kupp drafters, they drink for free today on the set of the Happy Hour.
Should have waited till Labor Day weekend to draft.
Indeed. I mean, with Kupp, it's just the bad vibes, the bad juju just continues.
Right.
Obviously, ends last season, not playing after he does his ankle, and now he's got the hamstring, which is lingering. And the issue is that these soft tissue injuries, particularly for veterans, and Kupp is 30, it's just... you just don't feel comfortable drafting Cooper Kupp. And so now it's a question of, 1, how far does he slide? And 2, who picks up the slack in the meantime if he does miss week 1, which at this point seems likely. And I mean, between Tutu Atwell, Van Jefferson, feeling great about those guys. I think Tyler Higbee will see an increase. We're going to talk about Cam Akers later in the show, but I think Akers is a guy as well who's going to see a lot more work.
Barry, what's your take on this? Is this something where it actually affects him in your rankings? Do you think that it's become this significant with Kupp?
Look, it's hashtag not ideal. Let's be clear about that, right? I mean, so he's a wide receiver over the age of 30 that suffered a major injury last year, hurt in the preseason, re-injures it. Now, they're saying all the right things. Hopefully he's there for opening day, but certainly it makes you a little bit nervous. I've moved him down in my overall ranks, right? I've moved him behind Tyreek Hill, behind Austin Eckler, behind Travis Kelce. I'm at 7 overall. And honestly, if I was in a draft with you and you took Bijan Robinson ahead of him, you took Amon-Ra St. Brown, Devontae Adams, CeeDee Lamb, even Garrett Wilson ahead of him, I wouldn't look at you like, really, what are you doing? So there's concern with Cooper Kupp where there wasn't before. The problem is that the upside is so massive. We've talked about this again. Jay has brought this up. We've talked last year on a points per game basis. not Justin Jefferson, not Jamar Chase, Cooper Kupp was still the number one wide receiver in fantasy football. I do think, again, Tyler Higbee is one of my favorite later round tight end targets because, I think he's going to have at least a 20 to 2 point, like a 20 to 22% target share. And if Kupp's injury lingers for a week or two, it'll go up even more. But yeah, not a lot else on Cooper Kupp. So I'm a little nervous about him, but still into the first round, I'm taking him. Like I said, in my personal ranks, I'm 7th overall.
Yep. Last thing on Kupp, there is some awkward correlation here where the more time that Kupp misses, the more likely they are to lose games. The more that they lose, the less likely they are to be incentivized to bring him back. And so I would just worry that they're going to take their time whenever Kupp is injured. And if there is re-injury, which hamstring injuries do tend to get re-injured more than other injuries, then all of a sudden Kupp is in trouble.
Well, Jay, I think it's a great point. Look at their schedule as we show it here. They start out at Seattle. That's not easy. They play the 49ers. I mean, we know the 49ers are one of the favorites in the NFC, and then they travel to Cincinnati. So if Kupp's not ready to go out of the gate, you can make an argument that the Rams are in significant trouble the first 3 weeks of the season.
Yep, they're 5.5-point underdogs in Seattle. I think that line could get even bigger, honestly. And then Niners at Bengals. I mean, at Colts, that will be easier, but I mean, at this rate, they'll be underdogs in that game too. And then the Eagles, there's a very good chance that they're 1-4 and they're already kind of planning for the future because they don't have their quarterback of the future on the roster. And this draft is an opportunity for them to reload.
Sneaky bet to pick
Wow.
number one overall?
Yeah. They're 10-1 to have the worst record in the NFL, and I
actually
think
not
that is very much in play, particularly if Kupp is going to miss the first couple weeks of the season, and that continues to build.
Meanwhile, did you guys just completely forget about the drive-by shot that Jay Croucher took at Stetson Bennett? Stetson Bennett hasn't even played a down. They don't have their quarterback of the future. You don't know that? Everyone's doubted Stetson Bennett, national champion Stetson Bennett.
Stetson Bennett's 36 years old. He's very much for the current. I'm not sure he's going to lead them into the future.
Yeah, they left out that not only Stafford isn't figuring out how the young kids hang these days. Stetson Bennett hasn't figured it out either. All right, more player news here on Kendre Miller. Saints head coach Dennis Allen said he's dealing with a hamstring injury. So this seems to be a new injury, Jay, for Kendre Miller in a backfield that could be a little thin week one. We know Alvin Kamara's dealing with the 3-game suspension. Jamal Williams is there, and we know what he could do. But at the end of the day, if Kendre Miller's not ready to roll, things get very thin for New Orleans.
Yeah, and this is a very sneaky, high-leverage fantasy spot this season is if you can solve the New Orleans backfield and draft the guy who's going to provide the most value relative to ADP, then you're sitting very pretty. It's kind of like picking the wide receiver in Baltimore who's going to pop, because the thing with the Saints is that they have the easiest schedule in the NFL. They are the division favorites in the NFC South for a reason, and they're going to be running the ball in a lot of second halves. And right now, in terms of who the guy is going to be, I mean, Alvin Kamara is going to miss the first few games. Jamal Williams is going to be likely a touchdown machine, but isn't going to get 3 down usage. And so Kendre Miller was the interesting one, but the fact that he is going to be compromised as well. I mean, I'm not really sure what to do with this situation. I think Alvin Kamara might be getting to the point where he's drifting too much. And I know he's not an exciting guy to draft, but at some point he's going to become a value.
Barry, is this a situation that it helps out Jamal Williams, or do you think no matter what, the Saints got to find somebody else to take some of the work off his plate as well?
Look, I think it certainly helps Jamal Williams. Those first 3 games should line up very nicely for him. He'll be a very chalk play in DFS. But this feels like, wait, what is that? That's Taysom Hill music. This is right? This is like we're all going to be on Jamal Williams for the first 3 weeks, and it's going to be, Taysom Hill, 3 carries for 8 yards and 2 touchdowns. Feels like that's what's coming our way, just to completely annoy us. It's a setback for Kendre Miller in terms of missing time, and then he was already going to be 3rd on the depth chart. Kendre Miller, I think, is a name that we will be talking about in the second half of the year. I really like him. I am out on Kamara this year. Maybe I'm wrong, but he made the hate list for a reason. I'd much rather have, in drafts even now, I get it, Jay, when you're talking about how Kamara keeps falling, and at some point you're just like, all right, let's see if he's got anything, but I prefer Kendre Miller at cost than to Alvin Kamara, because Kendre Miller is basically free in drafts. And yes, I don't think anyone likes Jamal Williams, except Jamal Williams is a perfectly fine, good, solid running back who should get a lot of run. I'm nervous about being vultured by Taysom Hill here, but yeah, they have They've Kirk Merritt. They signed Tony Jones, who's been there for a while. They signed him again to the practice squad. But no, it does feel like it'll be Jamal Williams and probably a little bit of Taysom Hill in that first 3 weeks.
Let's get into our 10 lists of 10 preview. Barry, this is obviously something that's free on NBCSports.com. You can read all 10 lists of 10, something that you do every single year. But the one that we are going to go really in-depth out of the gate on is the 10 preseason storylines I'm buying. A perfect time to react to these. So, Barry, I'll start with number 1. Darren Waller will be the focal point of Brian Daboll's passing game.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've seen this in the preseason, just being peppered with targets. We've talked about him a lot. Darren Waller, of course, on my love list as well. So you can argue that maybe I'm just confirming my priors. But the fact is that he is healthy. He is motivated. He is a perfect fit in terms of the crossing routes that he runs. He's a perfect fit for the kind of offense that Daboll likes to run. You think about how many targets Daboll used to send to the slot to like Cole Beasley in Buffalo. And now he's got a big, fast guy who's a total mismatch in Darren Waller. Also, look at what Daniel Jones does really well. He throws between the numbers. And so I think that Darren Waller is on the short list of players, of tight ends that could lead their team in targets, receiving yards, and receptions. Kelsey is one of them. Andrews is one of them. And Darren Waller is one of them as well. I think outside of Kelsey, he's got top 2 fantasy tight end upside. That's within the range of outcomes if Waller stays healthy this year.
Yeah, you've consistently ranked him over George Kittle throughout this summer. Jay, are you buying in on Waller's fit with the Giants?
I think so, and he's someone whose ADP is surging, and people are really buying in. I mean, that drive didn't help in the preseason.
3 targets.
Yeah, exactly. But with Waller, last time he was healthy and played a full season in 2020, he finished as tight end 2. So he clearly has that upside. And the other thing with Waller is that he's 30 years old, he's about to turn 31, but he's only played 74 games in the NFL. He hasn't had that much wear and tear because of the turmoil early on in his career. So I think that Waller and Andrews, I think those 2 guys can be closer to Travis Kelce, and I'd rather at cost have Waller or Andrews than spend a really high early pick on Travis Kelce.
Jay, how about number 2 here? Because I remember how high you were on Lamar Jackson going into last year, and now there's even more optimism this year because of Todd Monken's hiring. Number 2 is Lamar Jackson will return to MVP form in Todd Monken's high-octane offense. We know the new weapons they put around him. They invested a first-round pick in Zay Flowers. They gave Odell Beckham a lot of money on a 1-year deal, and everything's pointing up after Lamar got paid.
Yeah, and with Lamar, I find it so hard to just shake the prior of the 2019 season still I keep on expecting that guy and that kind of performance to come back when he won MVP unanimously. And then in 2020, 21, he was banged up, but he also just wasn't as good as he was in 2019, and maybe the league adjusted. But last year when he was healthy, he was starting to get back to that level. He was in the MVP mix, and I think that, if they are going to air it out more, that's only going to help him. He is, it's silly to say about Lamar Jackson because everyone says it, but he is an underrated passer. He's an excellent passer to complement, obviously, the dynamism on the ground. So yeah, it's very much within the realms of possibilities that Lamar Jackson is the number 1 quarterback in fantasy.
Barry, you align with that? You think Lamar can make a significant run, even over Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, and a lot of it's just kind of health related?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like that's a preseason storyline I'm buying into. I'm buying into the revamped Ravens high-octane offense under Todd Monken. Look, here's what I'll tell you. I have Lamar Jackson at 4. He made my love list. But if you told me, Connor, you're like, hey, Barry, here's one thing I can tell you. I can look into my crystal ball, and I'm going to assure you, Lamar Jackson is playing all 17 games this year. He's not getting hurt. If you told me that, he'd be my number 1 ranked quarterback in fantasy. Literally, only knock on Lamar Jackson, who last year, in a down year, still had over 700 yards rushing, still was a top 6 quarterback on a points per game basis. That was last year where he got hurt. He didn't have nearly the offensive play calling around him or the weapons around him. Like he was doing it with like Devin Duvernay, right? And DeMarcus Robinson and guys like that. And so, my only concern on Lamar is health because obviously he's missed a significant amount of time the last couple of years. But if you told me 17 games, he's the number 1 quarterback in fantasy, no question.
All right, Barry, number 3, which I'm a fan of here, and we got a taste of in the last preseason game, but we've gotten a taste of it since Aaron Rodgers arrived at Florham Park. With Aaron Rodgers as his quarterback, Garrett Wilson will have a monster breakout season, becoming the new Davante Adams.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've seen the hard knocks. We've seen the quotes about, literally Aaron Rodgers calling him Davante Adams. Connor, you cover that team really well. You do a great job for it. over at SNY. You tell me, am I insane on this one? But I just think Garrett Wilson, I have Garrett Wilson as a top 10 wide receiver, and I feel very confident in that. This is a guy who had over 17 points with Joe Flacco and Mike White, and now he gets Aaron Rodgers, who's going to do everything in his power, I think, to make Garrett Wilson have a monster season.
I'm with you all the way. You see the 147 targets on the screen. Corey Davis retires. Now you have a better quarterback, a team that will be able to throw when they want to. That number will go up. He should get 170, 175 targets this year. I think he's a bigger presence in the red zone with Rodgers. We saw them check out of a run play in the red zone and throw him the fade. So, Jay, I mean, it's hard not to buy into Garrett Wilson because of the carousel he dealt with at this position last year and still won Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, and I think one of the sneaky things about last season was just how desperate Jets fans were for Mike White to get healthy because they were
clamoring for it.
Yeah, because of how bad Flacco, who just could not move by the end, and Zach Wilson, obviously, how bad they were. I mean, Chris Streveler got in there at some point as well, and Wilson was still able to put up those 1,100 yards. And now you get Rodgers, and Rodgers last year, he wasn't close to the MVP of 2020 and 2021, but I wonder how much was that he was just at the end of his time with Green Bay. He didn't have a Garrett Wilson type of receiver, and also he was injured. And so I think that just the leap that Wilson is going to get going from those 4 quarterbacks last year to Rodgers, that's as big of a leap as anyone's going to get in terms of guys feeding them the ball.
That takes us to number 4, which includes another second-year player, and this one is Dameon Pierce will dominate touches in the Houston's backfield and catch 40-plus passes while running behind a better-than-you-think offensive line, Jay.
Yeah, I like that. I think Dameon Pierce is one of the best pure runners in football. I mean, just look at this. Just the way that he runs angry. I always think about how he dominated the Philadelphia Eagles in primetime last year. They had no answer for him. And his stats are skewed by just these random games last year where against Miami, he had 5 carries for 8 yards. The week before against Washington, 10 carries for 8 yards. And the Texans were so bad last year that he just found himself in these game states where he just had no chance to produce. And so I think the offense will be better. I think the team will be better overall. And I think that, he can be a guy who is, consistently getting close to 20 carries a game and being efficient and getting a little bit more work in the receiving game. I mean, you can probably speak to that better than I can, Connor. What's his upside as a pass catcher?
He's got good hands, and he's got once again, came out of college and is a great pass protector. So that gets you on the field in those roles. And Jay, we showed right there what he can do in space with the ball. He's just so difficult to tackle. Not to get crazy, but we always talk about on this show how great of a pure runner that Nick Chubb is. Dameon Pierce has that same style where it's upper body power, it's lower body power, and it's just pure determination. I mean, there was a play in college where they knocked his helmet off, and he kept running through people. So, Barry, this is a really fun one because Pierce, for some reason, has been slightly overlooked this summer. I think we were puzzled by his ADP a couple weeks ago. So I think Jay and I are completely aligning with you that he should have a monster year for the Texans.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's on my love list. And we had a draft. We had our show draft yesterday, and all you animals snaked me a ton. But I was able to get Dameon Pierce at least in that league. And like he's definitely one of my guys. He's one of my most rostered players this year. Dwayne McFarland, my friend Dwayne McFarland, who does a great job over at fantasylife.com, he writes something called the utilization report. And so he did a preseason utilization report. And this is per Dwayne. He's played 7 drives with CJ Stroud, right? The first team offense. In the preseason, Dameon Pierce has played 7 drives with CJ Stroud this preseason. In those drives, Pierce has logged 83% of the snaps, 83% of the rushing attempts, and had a 67% route participation. Those are like eye-popping numbers. Those are elite usage numbers when you compare it with other well-known pass-catching running backs, a 67% route participation. The anti-Dameon Pierce argument is like, oh, he's going to come off the field for Devin Singletary in third down. Oh, he's not that good. Oh, the Texans are brutal, so they're going to be down and throwing a lot. Well, again, that 67% route participation, yes, it's all small sample size, but this is what they're doing with their starting offense in the preseason, and that's what we expect this year with a new coaching staff in place. That means that he's not leaving the field on third down. To your point, Connor, it's within his skill set that came out of college, and so Devin Singletary, who, by the way, if you look at the numbers, isn't that good of a pass catcher, actually. He has not been great at that in the pros. I think Devin Singletary is more depth than kind of a 1A, a 1B to his 1A. My expectation here is Pierce gets at least 70% of the running back touches, maybe 75%. He doesn't come off the field. The Texans' offensive line, I think, is better than people give it credit for. So, yeah, I'm in on Dameon Pierce. I'm his running back 13. I'm buying this preseason usage that a true bell cow season is coming for Pierce, a potential RB1 season, but not at RB1 prices.
The fifth preseason storyline that you're buying, Barry, that the Steelers offense will take a nice step forward this year with Kenny Pickett being a nice late-round quarterback sleeper, and that Jaylen Warren will be a much bigger part of the offense at the expense of Najee Harris.
Yeah, Najee Harris is somebody that Jay Croucher took in our show draft. I was so glad that he took that.
Took him in the 6th round.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I can't wait till Jaylen Warren takes this job over. Look, there's been 5 preseason drives that the first-team offense has played. In those 5 drives, Kenny Pickett, 13 for 15, 199 yards, 2 touchdowns. Warren has candidly looked more explosive. And I think the most interesting thing here is that he's starting to play a little bit on first down. Look, we know Jaylen Warren's going to be the third down guy. But what happened a few times in the preseason is that he would stay on the field for third down, he would convert the third down, and then he would get run on first and second down. And so if you're telling me, call it a third of the early down work, that 2/3 of the early down work goes to Najee Harris and a third of the early down work goes to Jaylen Warren, and then all the passing down work goes to Jaylen Warren, I much prefer Jaylen Warren at cost to Najee Harris than Najee Harris this year. And I'm a big believer in the entire offense. Like, I could have thrown in Deontay Johnson or George Pickens here, Pat Freiermuth, who Jay did get, and I like Freiermuth this year. I just think that entire offense takes a big step forward. Kenny Pickett has looked fantastic this preseason. Everyone talks about how the Lions ended the season last year. No one talks about the Steelers going 7-2 down the stretch last year. We talked about this the other day, last week on the show with Drew Dinsick, and totally agree with this, that Mike Tomlin is a great bet for Coach of the Year.
Yep, Mike Tomlin in the 25-1 range for Coach of the Year, which is way too big when you consider that the Steelers are like plus 450 to win the division. If they win that division, which might be the best division in football, Mike Tomlin, who has never won Coach of the Year, is going to get a ton of credit there. I think that should be more like 12-1 for Coach of the Year. With Najee Harris, to borrow Matthew's phrase, I'm buying the dip on Najee Harris, where people are starting to treat him like he's Kenyon Drake. Like, Najee Harris is good. He was a high draft pick for a reason. He's still going to get the first crack at that role. I think this offense is just going to be better overall. Yes, Jaylen Warren is going to eat into his time, but I still think, I mean, this is 2 drafts in a row now where I've got him in the late 5th, early 6th round. Like, that is too late for Najee Harris. And yeah, I'm buying this offense overall. Loved what Pickett showed toward the end of the season. I mean, Connor, you know this as well as anyone. Like, he was thrown into the fire last year where he had to face the Jets and the Bills as his first 2 games, and then he really grew into the season. I think back to those game-winning drives that he led against Vegas, against Baltimore in prime time, looked the part. Offensive line will be better. Pickens, wide receiver 2 in year 2. I think that he's going to have a big year too. So there is a basis for success for Kenny Pickett this year.
All right, number 6 here, Jay. Luke Musgrave is the real deal and will be a viable mid-tier tight end 2 with legit tight end 1 upside. We've talked a lot how, sure, there's Christian Watson there, and maybe Romeo Doubs has a nice year 2, and we know they have the 2 running backs. But with Green Bay's offense, especially the reps with the starters that Musgrave has seen this summer, he feels like one of those tight end finds, and he's been this way for Barry. Barry slowly moved him up the ranks. One of those tight end finds that you're just hoping the target share can really help him.
Yeah, and I think just conceptually, you want to take flyers in situations where there's a lot of uncertainty. For instance, I think like the Bengals have a pretty certain situation with their top 2 wide receivers and Joe Mixon and Joe Burrow. Green Bay, we have no idea what that team is going to be. Right. Christian Watson is the number 1 wide receiver, but outside of that, I mean, there is just a ton of uncertainty, and uncertainty creates upside, and I think Luke Musgrave, particularly at the tight end position, he can capture some of that.
Barry, well, I know you've slowly bought into Luke Musgrave as this summer has gone on. What's that process been like?
Just what's this slowly? I've been
very slow.
I've been on him for quite some time now. Talking about just look. The fact of the matter is like his size speed combo. Connor, we talked about this a little bit on draft night when he went to the Packers, and we've talked about it throughout the preseason. He made my love list again, but. I've just been watching him in practice. I've been seeing him in games, and I'm just like, this guy is bigger. A guy that size shouldn't be that fast. And now he's playing tight end. He's going to be matched up against linebackers. It's just it's unfair. And the fact is that he's playing a lot. So again, going back to Dwayne. So that's just what I've noticed watching the games. And then Dwayne McFarland, again, his preseason utilization report on fantasylife.com, he noted this. Jordan Love had 37 dropbacks this preseason. And of those 37 dropbacks, Luke Musgrave had an 84% route participation, a 22% target share. Those are tight end one numbers. Now, the track record of rookie tight ends having fantasy production isn't a long list, right? You've got Gronk, you've got Evan Ingram, you've had flashes here and there, but Dulcich last year, had some moments. But that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't know that I want to go into a season with him as my starting tight end. I'd want somebody that's a little bit more established. But I absolutely love him as a number 2 tight end or for deeper leagues as a flyer, because I do think there's a decent chance he's the number 2 pass catcher on what I think will be a better than people think offense. There's a chance Jordan Love is good, guys. I actually think Jordan Love is going to be good, adequate to decent. I don't know he's going to be great, but I think there's a chance he's above average.
All right, that takes us to number seven. After an offseason where the acquisitions of DeAndre Swift and Rashad Penny were the big talking points around the Eagles' backfield, number 7 here, Barry, Kenneth Gainwell will have a legit role in that Eagles' backfield.
We talked about this when the news came out that he was running with the ones, and people are like, "Well, come on!" And they're just resting Swift and Penny, who have had extensive injury histories. Like, when the real games start, it'll be Penny and Swift and Penny, and Gainwell will just have his small little role. And I don't think that's the case. Again, if you watch these games, this is going to be a 3-headed monster. Ultimately, the Eagles' backfield will be a 3-headed monster with Swift, Penny, and Gainwell. You'll still see a little bit of Boston Scott. Obviously, Jalen Hurts always a threat at the goal line. But my argument here is that Gainwell is going to be basically equal to these guys. It's going to be Swift, Penny, and Gainwell. It's going to be a true 3-headed monster. And if you're saying all 3 of these guys have more or less an equal amount of touches, Gainwell is by far the cheapest of the 3 at ADP. Also, this is a stat that I think is crazy, but Kenneth Gainwell had, something like 11 fewer goal-to-go carries than Miles Sanders last year. They were okay getting it when they got in close. They're okay giving it to Kenneth Gainwell between the tackles. They use him in a variety of ways, not just as a 2-minute drill guy or a passing down back. So, yeah, I'm buying into Kenneth Gainwell as a thing this year.
Yeah, and to further prove your point, Barry, it's a simple one, but Kenneth Gainwell plays, and you can't always say that about Rashad Penny and DeAndre Swift. So if that backfield gets thin quickly, Gainwell's role can only improve. All right, number 8, James Cook will be the RB1 for the Bills and get north of 15 touches a game. Jay, we know they brought in Dameon Harris. They have Latavius Murray there. But James Cook was drafted in the 2nd round for a reason 2 years ago.
He was, and Josh Allen's never really had that go-to running back that they've wanted. At the same time, there's a lot of guys on that team now between Diggs and Davis and Cook and Harris and Latavius Murray and Dalton Kincaid, and there's just a lot of mouths to feed. So I agree that Cook is worth drafting, at his current ADP just because of the upside and what that offense could be. That could be the best offense in football, but I think there's going to be some annoying situations where Dameon Harris is vulturing, and some games he's just not as involved as he could be.
Barry, is Cook one of those guys that's, an adequate approach if you're going maybe 0 RB or kind of waiting just a little bit?
Yeah, I think he's better than that, honestly. I think he's somebody to actively target. Jay just said it right there, right? He's just like, they have a lot of guys there. That's right. They have a lot of guys. Whatever. James Cook is a special talent. There's a reason the Bills went out and got a 2nd-round pick. And I think the fantasy industry and drafters are reacting too strongly to Dameon Harris coming in, and getting the red zone work and getting that touchdown in the preseason game. Yes, Dameon Harris or Latavius Murray or whoever, there will be some goal line touches that don't go to James Cook. And Josh Allen, of course, is always a threat to run it in himself. Having said that, think about Ramondre Stevenson last year, and there's slightly different running backs, right, obviously, but the point is that Dameon Harris was on the Patriots last year. He had that goal-to-go, touchdown equity. Ramondre Stevenson had 6 touchdowns last year, literally just 6 touchdowns last year. And yet Ramondre Stevenson, because of his passing participation, because of his usage, was still a top 7 running back in fantasy. And by the way, the Bills are going to play at a higher pace of play with a better quarterback and a better offense and being in scoring position more often than the Patriots were last year. So I just think James Cook, if you're telling me this guy's definitely getting 15 and north of 15 touches a game in one of, if not the best offense in football, I'm in. I'm in on James Cook, and I'm not worried if Damian Harris vultures a handful of touchdowns over the course of the year. James Cook is going to get his. He's going to be a true 3-down back for the best offense in football.
Barry, for number 9, I know you were smiling ear to ear when you put this one in. You're buying that Sam Howell is going to be a very good fantasy streamer this year.
Look, we've talked about him a lot. Future MVP, future Hall of Famer, Sam Howell, hail the Commanders, hail victory. But look, all my jokes aside, Connor, you have to admit, as somebody who breaks down film for a living, Sam Howell has looked pretty good this preseason. Looks dialed in, getting rave reviews in camp. There's a couple of things that you really like about this. Number one, he has an aggressive play caller in Eric Bieniemy. He has elite weapons around him. Now, I'm a little nervous about Terry McLaurin's toe, of course, but assuming help from McLaurin and Jahan Dotson, along with a really nice pass-catching running back in Antonio Gibson, Brian Robinson will be used a little bit. Whether it's Logan Thomas or Cole Turner at the tight end position, we know what Curtis Samuel can do as well. All of a sudden, you're like, you know what? There's a lot of skill players around this kid who can run. Over 1,100 rushing yards in his last college season. You think about what he did that one NFL game, the last NFL game he played, that start against Dallas last week. Like, he was a top 10 fantasy quarterback that week. He had almost 40 rushing yards and a touchdown in that one game, his first game ever. So just the mobility, I think he's potentially, Connor, you keep me honest here, but I think Sam Howell has Daniel Jones-like upside. I think he's got that kind of speed. And, Daniel Jones was like a borderline top 10 quarterback last year.
And what I like about him, listen, if you're going to bet on late-round quarterbacks in fantasy, you bet on guys that have a big arm and are aggressive with the big arm and run. Those are the two things. So Sam Howell, as long as he keeps that aggressive nature, which is really a special part of his game, as we showed in the highlights there, and does continue to run, there's going to be value for him in fantasy, Jay.
Yeah, there will be. And I'm looking forward to the footage of Matthew, the unicorn, and the teddy bear after the show, sitting down to watch Sam Howell YouTube highlights. But I think with Sam Howell, why is there such a disparity between him and Anthony Richardson, just in perception? Because Howell actually ran the ball 183 times his last year in college, whereas Richardson was a bit more of a reluctant runner, as we've talked about. Do you think the gap between, Sam Howell's going outside the top 20 quarterbacks, right. Richardson is creeping up towards the top 12. Is that warranted?
Richardson has started to rise where you get a little bit of cold feet. You're like, okay, I liked him as my value pick. Now we see people taking him as a legitimate starter at times. And I think what Richardson, that combine, and this isn't an insult, but that combine at his size, what he was able to do from explosive scores and 40 time will always live with people.
Yep.
Now, does that translate onto the field? That remains to be seen. And Howell's just not that freakishly built, speedy kind of guy, more of a scrambler, turn it into runs kind of guy. So I think that'll be the difference there. But in fantasy, all yards count the same.
Yep.
I'll say this. I think, Jay, you bring up a great point. I know how much it pains you to say nice things about Sam Howell, who is my QB2 in our Superflex show league. But you bring up a great point. And I think, honestly, some of it is just right. Anthony Richardson looks the part. By the way, we all like Anthony Richardson. This isn't to denigrate Anthony Richardson. We love Anthony Richardson here. But just Anthony Richardson looks like if you were doing central casting for a movie, I need the big superstar quarterback. He looks like Anthony Richardson, right? It's a little bit of I think there's a picture of DK Metcalf on Hunter Renfrow, and you're like, wait, these two guys play the same position, right, next to each other? The fact of the matter is that he looks like an NFL quarterback, whereas Sam Howell looks like, I don't know,
Creatine Baker
bartender. So I think that's part of it, honestly. But I think you could make the argument, and I'm a homer, so whatever, but you could make the argument, right, that he will run more than Richardson this year, right? Because, again, we've talked about this. Anthony Richardson's instincts are not to take off and run, which it is Howell's. Howell had more rushing yards his senior year in college than Richardson did. There's a chance that he runs more than Richardson, and we think they've got a better offense than the Colts. He's certainly got more. I would take Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, the running backs, and Curtis Samuel over Michael Pittman, Alec Pierce, and who knows who's going to be the running back, right? Whatever. They got Jelani Woods and at tight end, and then, maybe it's Deion Jackson or Evan Hull or Zach Moss. I think you could make an argument that Howell does wind up with a better fantasy year than Anthony Richardson. It's not how I have them ranked, but I don't think it's a crazy question. And I think Howell is a tremendous value in drafts.
Our last preseason storyline that you're buying into here, Barry, the Patriots offense will be much improved under Bill O'Brien, and Hunter Henry will be a focal point of the passing offense. We heard so much after they signed Mike Gesicki, but it is clearly still Hunter Henry's show at the tight end spot for an offense that values the position.
Look, first off, the idea that the Patriots offense will be better, like, nowhere to go but up. Like, I mean, let's just, that's a little shooting fish in a barrel. But it has looked competent and put together in the preseason this year, whereas last year it did not. Bill O'Brien traditionally has used a lot of 12 in terms of play calling. So the tight ends have always been a big part of the Patriots offense, and I think it'll continue to be probably even more so with Bill O'Brien calling the plays this year. Hunter Henry has a connection with Mac Jones. Hunter Henry's good, man. Hunter Henry, like when he was with the Chargers, all he did was score touchdowns. He's been that way with the Patriots as well. Mike Gesicki already banged up. I know Hunter Henry's dealing with a little something as well, but the expectation here is that, like, they're going to need red zone threats on that team. And so I like Hunter Henry. Hunter Henry is, after Luke Musgrave, Hunter Henry is one of my favorite late round, two tight, if you're in a league that values, tight end or deeper league. He's one of my favorite deeper league tight end late round flyers.
All right, that takes us to list number 2. These are the 10 chicken players, a nervous bird, right? Players that you just feel a little uneasy about, Barry. And here they are in DeAndre Swift, Mike Evans, Najee Harris, George Kittle, J.K. Dobbins, Dak Prescott, Drake London, Alvin Kamara, Jonathan Taylor, and Deshaun Watson. Barry, who's a player on this list that, might surprise some people, but explain why you're a little bit uneasy about them?
Look, I mean, a lot of these guys made my hate list as well. I'm just a little nervous. But how about one that I had, I think Dak Prescott makes me a little nervous. Guy doesn't run anymore. He's averaging under 12 rushing yards a game the last 2 years. He lost Kellen Moore, who I think I thought that was a big loss for them. They want to run more, and they're going to have a really good defense, so it's not going to be a lot of shootouts. J.K. Dobbins doesn't catch passes. Health has been an issue. Missed a lot of time in the preseason. Now, reports are, obviously, Todd Monken uses his running backs in the passing game. So there's a chance that Dobbins, who did catch balls in college somewhat, suddenly does discover usage in the passing game. But so far, we just haven't seen it. Three-headed monster there in Baltimore. So I'm a little nervous about J.K. Dobbins, especially in terms of where he's going. But all these guys have question marks around them. I'm sure they'll be fine. I have them ranked appropriately. But I've just found, as I've gone through drafts, I just tend to draft somebody that's similarly ranked and not actually deal with any one of these players.
Our third list goes in a little bit of a different direction. These are the 10 unsexy players that will help you win. Barry, how about somebody on this list that, people look at and they go, nobody cares, right? That's what you always say. Nobody cares when they're drafted. People kind of roll their eyes, but at the end of the day, they could be a consistent, helpful performer.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about Mixon, I think, is an RB1, but he's not really being drafted like that. Lockett as well. I love David Montgomery. We talked earlier in the show about how we think the Pittsburgh Steelers offense is going to really take a big step forward. Deontay Johnson has 85 receptions each of the last 3 years. He's one of only 5 wide receivers in the NFL that can say that. Obviously, touchdown regression in a positive manner is coming after he got so many targets last year and didn't score a touchdown. He was top 6 in end zone targets last year. So an improved Kenny Pickett and Steelers offense, I think, will help you on Deontay Johnson, who everyone got burned with last year, and so they're out on him. I love Amon-Ra St. Brown, so how about the guy throwing him the ball? Jared Goff, top 5 in touchdown passes last season. 20.6 fantasy points per game when he plays indoors. As we've talked about so many times, 7 of their 8 final games are played in a dome this year indoors. And I also really like Isaiah Pacheco. He had 15 or more touches in every game from weeks 10 through 16. And we saw it in the playoffs, especially in the Super Bowl. Like, they started using him in the passing game. I know there's some concern that CEH is going to be mixed in with him and McKinnon, and all of a sudden it's a 3-headed monster. But Pacheco, I think, proved that he can be the lead back and maybe have some passing game usage on, again, one of the best offenses in football. Last one for me, Adam Thielen. Adam Thielen is just dominating targets in the preseason. They're going to have to throw to someone in Carolina. And Adam Thielen, who's basically been left for dead in drafts, I think is somebody that, as long as he stays healthy, will be a productive wide receiver 3.
With that, we're going to take our first break, but when we're back, we're looking at what's on tap as we get into some preseason risers. The final weekend of draft season is upon us, and what better way to spend it than with us? There are 2 fantasy football happy hour marathons this weekend, including a monster 16-hour marathon on Saturday, beginning at 12 p.m. Eastern Time on Peacock. Guys, what are the chances someone watches all of that one? And you know what time it is now. What's on Tap? What's on Tap is brought to you by Bud Light, the official beer sponsor of the NFL. Let's take a look at who is trending up heading into the regular season. As you see Barry's list here, including Dameon Pierce, Darren Waller, Calvin Ridley, Sam Howell, Jalen Warren, Jahan Dotson, Tank Bigsby, Sky Moore, Luke Musgrave, who we talked about earlier, and Jake Ferguson there, Barry.
Yeah, look, Jake has been, gotten really kind of tight in one usage for Dallas in the preseason. There was concern, is it going to be a split between, him and Schoonmaker? And the fact of the matter is, this is Jake Ferguson's role. He's going to be the starting tight end for the Cowboys. Dalton Schultz, now a member of the Texans. And speaking of Dalton Schultz, top 5 among tight ends in receptions and touchdowns over the past 2 seasons. Now, they have a lot of mouths to feed. They've got Michael Gallup. They've got Brandon Cooks. Obviously, they've got Aites. My guy Aites there. Not to mention Tony Pollard, and Mike McCarthy said he wants to run. But I just think it's worth noting that the last couple of years, the Dallas tight end has been a big outlet for Dak Prescott and for this Cowboys offense. Jake Ferguson is going to be that guy, and so he's kind of a guy that has seen his value rise in the preseason.
Jay, what about you? Who's somebody that, is kind of trending upwards after the summer?
Well, firstly, Connor, I love this setup with the bar with
Feeling
our friends at Bud Light. Yeah, you kind of got to
pour a couple pints for the crew.
Yeah, you got
Barry, when you come back, you'll love it.
Yep, you got a bit of a Tom Cruise in cocktail type of vibe. So I'd be Brian Brown in that situation, though it didn't end great for Brian Brown in that movie. Not to spoil Cocktail, which came out in 1988.
Some furious listeners right now.
From Brian Brown to Cam Akers. Cam Akers is my guy here, who's a bit of a riser in preseason. I'm not sure there's been that much that's actually happened outside of now the Cooper Kupp injury, Connor, which has created more usage for Cam Akers going forward, I think. But it kind of in Rashad Penny 2021 fashion, I think it went a little bit under the radar, the fact that Cam Akers, he was running back for the last 6 weeks of the season. And the last 6 weeks of last season, Connor, he still had the same bad offensive line. He didn't have Cooper Kupp there to take away attention. So I think Cam Akers, who is, an unsexy name in a way because of that offense, he's a guy who showed that he could produce in a pretty adverse situation last year. So I think that he's someone who's going to continue to rise up draft boards as we head into the season.
Barry, looking at the volume, purely volume that Cam Akers should get in theory, are you buying in on that one as well?
100%. Cam Akers made my love list. He's one of those guys that I've been talking about all preseason about, like, there are these guys going in the middle rounds of drafts that are cheap volume because of where they're going, right? Dameon Pierce to me is the poster child for it. We talked about Pierce, but Cam Akers, James Conner, Isaiah Pacheco, I think Dave Montgomery, James Cook, all these guys are going to touch the ball 15 to 20 times a game. Brian Robinson is in that list as well. And so they're just some really nice, cheap volume going late in drafts. Cam Akers, who over the final 6 games was a top 5 fantasy running back last year, is certainly somebody who I think people are starting to warm up to, and he's seen his value rise throughout the preseason. Especially if Cooper Kupp's going to miss time, he may be all they have. The entire offense may be Cam Akers.
Yeah, and you mentioned a lot of running backs there, Matthew. I think there are some wide receiver parallels there as well, where guys like Marquise Brown and Michael Pittman, who are going to be on, I think, suspect offenses, those guys are going late in drafts just because people have this kind of physical aversion to the Arizona Cardinals offense and the uncertainty around the Colts. But those guys are just going to get a ton of targets like they did last year. And, I mean, you don't need to be on a great team and great offense to produce fantasy value. I think back to last year, kind of Josh Jacobs won the rushing title on a pretty bad Vegas team. So you can definitely produce without scoring 35 points a game, your team, and winning games.
Guys, for me, my preseason riser, it's not really about what he did. It's about what he didn't do. And that's he didn't get hurt going into the season to Raheem Mostert, right? Yep. We talked about this earlier in the week. Jeff Wilson goes on the short-term IR. Devon Achane, it sounds like he'll be able to practice leading into week 1, but he's been dealing with a shoulder injury, and he is a smaller running back. So for Raheem Mostert, on a really good Miami offense, kind of be given the keys to just go. And yes, he's a guy with injury history, but his ADP didn't make sense. He was being drafted after Jeff Wilson. Now this injury is going to flip that. But Raheem Mostert purely staying healthy to go into the start of the season makes him my riser.
Yep, I think that makes a lot of sense. And again, people just don't want to get involved with that Miami backfield just because there are a lot of people there. There's Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson when he comes back from his injury, and Devon Achane, who is everyone's favorite kind of pick there. But I don't know. I think Devon Achane is in a different tier to this, but kind of reminds me a little bit of the Isaiah Spiller buzz from last season, which just never materialized. And that is the thing often with rookies, is that sometimes it just doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen for guys. They don't get the run that you'd hope they do. And I think Raheem Mostert is the safest guy to get work in that backfield at the moment.
Barry, I think
He's
you
always
took
been
Mostert in our
productive.
draft yesterday.
I'm sorry, what'd you say, Connor?
I think you took Mostert in our draft yesterday.
No, that's correct. I did. That's right. Friend of the show, Raheem Mostert. Raheem must start. Again, he's always been productive when he's been out there. Now he's got a chance to, wait for it, run away with the Miami Dolphins starting running back job. He's going to have that opportunity. Health is always going to be a concern with him. But as the lead running back on one of the best offenses in football, Mostert is somebody who's going way too late in drafts. And by the way, even if he misses some time, even if at some point, and hopefully the guy stays healthy all year long, but even if he does miss some time, you'll getting whatever, half a season out of him as the lead running back of the Dolphins. I'm in. And I can't believe you guys let me get him. I don't know where I got him, like probably the 10th round, 11th round, something insanely late. All of you guys just silly.
Well, firstly, I love that Matthew persists with the Raheem must start nickname, even though Raheem Mostert literally came on the show and we posed to him which nickname he prefers between Matthew's Raheem must start and my Raheem the Dream, and he emphatically said Raheem the Dream, Connor. So maybe we should go with that one. But the other thing with Raheem Mostert, he's averaged 5.4 yards per carry in his entire career, which is just completely insane. That was basically what Jonathan Taylor averaged in 2021, one of the greatest running back seasons of all time. Now, it helps that he's been in Kyle Shanahan and Kyle Shanahan disciple offenses, but he's in one of them right now with Mike McDaniel. And I think that team, there's just going to be a lot of, to use basketball time, there's going to be a lot of space on the floor for him to get to the rim with that Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle passing game, just meaning that you can't stack the box. And so I think that he is just going to be a guy who continues to produce.
Barry, I want to tap into your list one more time. You like that, Jay?
Terrible.
And talk about Jahan Dotson, because, listen, I know this isn't the news you want to think about, but if Terry McLaurin, if this lingers, right, foot injuries can be a little scary, and it does impact him week one or maybe beyond that, how much does that change the entire perception and usage of a guy like Jahan Dotson, who can win down the field and now has a quarterback that can throw down the field?
Last 5 games of last year, he had a 24% target share. First 4 games of last year, he scored 4 touchdowns. We've talked about this. Kid had 20 touchdowns in 2 seasons, his last 2 seasons at Penn State. Scoring touchdowns is a skill, right? Getting open is a skill. And I think when we saw Terry McLaurin go down in that preseason game, I think, what was it, 5 straight targets or something like that for Dotson, or 4 of the next 5 passes went to Dotson. The talent's off the chart. He's somebody that has first-round draft capital. He produced last year when he's out there in the field. And there's a chance, again, I'm praying that everything's okay, but turf toe can be tricky with wide receivers. And either way, even if McLaurin's out there, I think people are too low on Jahan Dotson. He's my wide receiver 36. The talent's off the chart, and clearly there's already a connection between him and Sam Howell.
All right, we're going to take our last break. When we're back, it's time for last call here at the Happy Hour Bar. We're looking at the best fantasy team names. Football is coming to NBC and Peacock to kick things off. West Virginia, Penn State, the premiere of Big Ten Saturday night. Here comes Saturday night. Jay, you'll be on pregame.
I will be. Yeah, looking forward to it.
If you can't get enough of Jay on the Fantasy Football
Penn
Happy
State
Hour,
Jay.
And he had, again, and I want to keep Jay honest. When you watch him on the pregame show tomorrow night, make sure they introduce him as being from Fantasy Football Happy Hour and not Bet the Edge. I'm going to be angry. I'll fire off an angry tweet or something like that. Don't, we better get some pub, Connor. You and I better get some pub for Jay, cheating on us.
It's
going
true.
over there to do some Big Ten betting.
It's true.
Yep.
I will be tuning in.
Noted, Matthew. Noted.
All right. I'm going to, for the 10 lists of 10, we're going to continue that theme here and look at fantasy team names. You guys can straight up stop me if there's one you just have to talk about, but I'll read them through and we'll look back. The first one is from GerdCon345. The summer I turned Purdy. This is Greg's fantasy team name.
It's okay. It's a good introduction one.
Okay, yeah, we're starting off slower here. Mets fan 126. Laporta Potty. I like that one.
Don't love the visuals it conjures.
All right, the next one from Dima B549. Mamma Mia, Jameer, we go again.
Yeah, that's good.
Jay's
Particularly like your reading of it too, Connor.
Yeah, pretty. I put the emphasis in Mamma Mia. Okay, the next one here from Perkles.
And wait, hang on, read the other ones there. To infinity and Bijan.
To infinity and Bijan.
You know what? There's actually an opportunity there where that could be changed if you took Tagovailoa to Infinity and Bijan.
Yes, this one, Eric also went with to infinity and Bijan. And then who dat went with Alave when you call me Big Papa. That's a good
Shades
one.
of Keanu Reeves in Hardball.
Yeah, David crushed that one. That's a personal favorite. All right, this one from Ted. The Bryce is right. Shout out to the legend, Barker.
Sure. Yep.
Yes, of course. All right, and then FF Ball Culture, Bijan Renaissance Tour.
Yep.
You like that, Jay?
Yeah, you said that correctly.
Yes, that's the right way to say
correct.
it.
Beyonce.
All right, the Mike Puma, Bijan Mustard. I believe that was a play on a name in our league as well. It's growing popularity. All right, Kentness, Public the Enemy. And our last one here from Jeff, Pirine into your soul.
I don't know.
That's
pretty good.
That's maybe terrifying. Yes.
Come on.
Who's the runaway favorite here, Jay?
Public be enemy is good, but it's a love when you call me Big Papa by margin.
Yes,
That's like
that's
the Bills playing the current LA Rams. Also like a couple other ones. Django A-Chained. I like that. Django A-Chained is a good one.
Yep.
Akers Dozen, kind of another standard one. There's one stand out to you, Matthew?
I agree with you, but after that one, I'll say I kind of really like to infinity and Bijan. You know, Toy Story is one of my all-time favorite movies. It's my daughter's one of their favorite movies as well. So I have a soft spot for Buzz Lightyear and the gang. So to infinity and Bijan's pretty good.
Yeah, that's why you have so many toys with you at all times.
Yes,
indeed.
What is your personal bedroom?
Yeah.
Oh man, I still have Laporta Potty stuck into my image. So with that, we will send everybody to the weekend. Watch Jay on Big Ten Saturday night pregame. We'll be back Monday for Connor, for Matthew and Jay. We're out. See ya.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBC Sports and Rotoworld.com. Just want to thank you so much for watching what you just watched, or at least being too lazy to click out of it after the autoplay just kept it going. So either way, thank you so much for just letting it scroll by your screen. And now I'd like to ask you respectfully, please subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel for the latest NFL news, fantasy headlines from Rotoworld, and betting analysis from NBC Sports Edge.